It was just another quiet evening at home. One of those unremarkable nights when the air hums with routine. I had come home early from work, eager to surprise Michelle, my wife, with her favorite takeout. I figured we could relax and watch a movie together, something we hadn't done in weeks. The house felt unusually quiet when I stepped in, a silence that pressed against my ears and raised the hairs on my neck. The kitchen was empty. Dishes from breakfast still sat in the sink, untouched. That was odd. Michelle usually cleaned up before starting her day. My heart quickened as I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. The door was ajar, just enough to offer a sliver of the room beyond. That's when I heard it. A muffled sound, almost like a suppressed laugh. My stomach tightened. I pushed the door open. For a moment, time froze. I saw them, Michelle tangled in an intimate embrace with not one but two women. The dim light of the bedside lamp cast shadows on their bodies, their movements unmistakable. The air was thick with the scent of perfume, sweat, and betrayal. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell is this? I roared, my voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. Michelle gasped, her eyes wide with horror as she scrambled to cover herself. The two women bolted upright, grabbing at sheets and clothing, their expressions a chaotic blend of fear and guilt. David, I don't know what to say, Michelle stammered, her voice trembling and fragile. Don't insult me, I yelled, the anger bursting out of me like a dam breaking. My hand lashed out before I could stop myself, connecting with Michelle's cheek in a stinging slap that echoed in the room. Tears welled in her eyes as she held her face, but she said nothing. One of the women, a blonde with sharp features, glared at me. Hey, there's no need for violence. Violence, I snapped, turning to her. You invade my home, defile my marriage, and you think you can lecture me? My words were venomous, each one dripping with the bitter taste of betrayal. Shall we talk? I interrupted, my voice rising. When were you planning on talking to me, Michelle? Before or after the betrayal? The silence after my outburst felt heavier than the slap I just delivered. Michelle stood there, frozen, clutching the sheet to her chest as if it could shield her from the storm raging in the room. The two women sat awkwardly on the edge of the bed, exchanging guilty glances but saying nothing. I couldn't believe it. This was my wife, the woman I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with. I was drowning in an ocean of betrayal, and the waves of disbelief threatened to pull me under. You've got nothing to say, huh? I growled, pacing the room like a caged animal. For years, I've been faithful, devoted to you and to us. And this is what I come home to. Michelle finally found her voice, but it was small, like a whisper against a hurricane. David, please. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Oh, so that's your concern? I cut her off, my voice dripping with venom. That I found out? Not that you've been lying to me, sneaking around, and tearing our marriage apart piece by piece. One of the women, the brunette, stood up, holding her hands out defensively. Look, we didn't mean to hurt anyone. Maybe we should leave. Leave. I shot her a glare so sharp that she visibly recoiled. Oh, you're not getting off that easy. You both stay right here. You're going to listen to this just like she will. I jabbed a finger in Michelle's direction. Michelle flinched, tears streaming down her cheeks.
David, I'm sorry.
Don't, I bellowed. Don't you dare say you're sorry, because sorry doesn't erase what I just saw. Sorry doesn't fix the years of lies. And sorry doesn't explain this. I gestured wildly at the tangled mess of betrayal before me. Her lip quivered, and for a moment, I thought she might try to justify it. Instead, she crumbled, sinking to the floor. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to explain this. The anger inside me burned hotter. Explain what, Michelle? That you've been lying to me? That you've been... what? Exploring your sexuality? Living some double life? She buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled but still audible. The sound only fueled my rage. Tell me, Michelle. I pressed, my voice trembling with fury. How long has this been going on? Weeks? Months? Years? It's not like that, she choked out between sobs. Then enlighten me, I shouted, slamming my fist against the wall. It's been a few months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I didn't plan it, David. It just happened. I laughed bitterly. It just happened? Oh, well, that makes everything fine, doesn't it? The brunette spoke up again, her voice steady but cautious. Look, this isn't just some fling for her. She's been struggling, trying to figure out who she is. And that gives her a free pass to lie to me? I snapped, turning my glare on her. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? To our marriage? David? Michelle interrupted, her voice trembling but firmer now. I'm not trying to justify what I did. I know I hurt you, but you can't lie anymore. I've been lying to myself for years. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Lying to yourself? Yes, she said, her tears still flowing. I love you, David. I do. But I'm also attracted to women, and I've been trying to bury that part of me for so long. I thought I could ignore it, but I couldn't. Her confession hit me. I staggered back, leaning against the wall for support. My mind reeled, grappling with what she had just revealed. And what about us? I asked, my voice quieter now but still edged with pain. What about the life we've built? Was any of it real? Yes, she insisted, crawling toward me on her knees. It was real, David. It still is. But I don't know how to reconcile the person I am with the life we've built. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sight of her desperation, the sound of her confession. But the words clung to me, suffocating me. You should have told me, I whispered, before it came to this. Before the betrayal. Michelle's sobs echoed in the room, mingling with the deafening silence that had fallen over the three of us. I stood there, my chest heaving, trying to grasp the reality of her words. She'd been lying to me, to herself, to our marriage. And now, here we were, in pieces. I didn't know how long I stayed there, leaning against the wall, staring at the floor. The weight of everything she had just said was crushing me. The betrayal, the lies, her hidden identity. It was as if the life I thought I knew had been a mirage. And now the truth stood naked before me. You should go, I muttered, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. The brunette raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I looked up, my glare hardening. You, both of you, get out of my house. Now. Michelle's head snapped up. David, wait. No, I barked, cutting her off. You don't get to ask me to wait, Michelle. Not after this. They need to leave. Now. The blonde, who had remained silent until now, stood and began gathering her clothes. She glanced at Michelle, then at me, her face pale. We'll go, she murmured, her voice trembling. The brunette hesitated, her jaw tightening as if she wanted to argue, but she eventually followed suit. Michelle, call us if you need anything, she said softly before shooting me a cold look. Get out, I growled, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. They hurried past me, clutching their belongings as they disappeared down the stairs. I didn't move until I heard the front door slam shut behind them. Only then did I turn back to Michelle, who was still on the floor, her face streaked with tears. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she said, shaking her head. I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Hurt doesn't even begin to describe this. You've humiliated me, Michelle. I didn't want to lie to you anymore, she said, her voice trembling. I've been living with this secret for so long, and I couldn't keep pretending. Pretending? I spat, anger flaring up again. You've been pretending? What about me, Michelle? What about our life? Our home? Our vows? Was that all just pretend to you? No, she insisted, scrambling to her feet. It wasn't pretend. I love you, David.
I swear I do.
Don't you dare say that to me right now, I snapped, my voice rising. You don't get to say you love me after what you've done. She flinched as if I'd struck her again, But I didn't care. My heart was in shreds, and her tears didn't move me. I need some air, I muttered, turning toward the door. David, please, she called after me, her voice cracking. I didn't stop. Couldn't. If I stayed in that house a second longer, I felt like I would explode. I stormed out of the front door, slamming it behind me. The cool night air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging inside me. I paced the driveway, running my hands through my hair, trying to breathe. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to face this? My wife, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. And not just with one person, but with two. And now she was telling me she wasn't even sure who she was. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through my contacts. I stopped when I reached her parents' number. A surge of anger washed over me. They deserved to know what their perfect daughter had done. Without thinking, I hit call. The phone rang twice before Michelle's father picked up. His familiar, warm voice came through the line, oblivious to the storm brewing on my end. David, good to hear from you. Everything okay? I took a deep breath, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. No, Frank, everything is not okay. I need to talk to you and Carol. It's urgent. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the weight in my tone clearly catching him off guard. All right, he said cautiously. What's going on? Not over the phone, I said curtly. Can I come by now? Of course. Is Michelle with you? No, I said, my voice hardening. This is about her, though. I'll explain when I get there. All right, son, he said, his voice laced with concern. Come on over. We'll be here. I hung up without another word and climbed into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I drove. The familiar streets felt foreign, like the entire world had shifted out of alignment. When I arrived at their house, the porch light was on, and Frank was standing at the door, his brow furrowed with worry. Carol appeared behind him, clutching a dish towel, her face etched with confusion. David, what's going on? Frank asked as I stepped inside. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. You need to know what Michelle has done, I said bluntly, my voice sharper than I intended. Carol's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Is she okay? She's fine, I said, pacing the living room. But our marriage isn't. Your daughter has been cheating on me. What? Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Frank's face darkened, his jaw tightening. What do you mean, cheating? I turned to face them, the words spilling out in a torrent of anger and betrayal. I came home tonight and found her in our bed with two women. Two. She's been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back for months. And now she's telling me she's not even sure who she is. Carol sank onto the couch, her face pale, while Frank remained standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. David, are you sure about this? Carol asked weakly, her voice trembling. Sure, I barked. I walked in on them, Carol. I saw it with my own eyes. Frank sat down heavily in his armchair, rubbing a hand over his face. I don't know what to say, he muttered. I never thought Michelle. This doesn't sound like her. Doesn't sound like her? I said, my voice rising. Well, maybe you didn't know your daughter as well as you thought. David? Carol said softly, tears pooling in her eyes. She's still our daughter. And she's still my wife. I shot back, my voice cracking. Or at least she was. But now, I don't know what we are anymore. Frank leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression grave. What do you want us to do, David? I don't know, I admitted, my anger giving way to despair. I thought you should know. Maybe you can talk to her, help her figure out what the hell she wants. Because right now, I can't even look at her. Carol wiped her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. What about you, David? What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I can't stay in that house tonight. Frank stood, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. You can stay here as long as you need to. We'll talk to Michelle tomorrow. But for now, try to get some rest. Rest. The word felt alien to me, How could I rest when my entire life had just been turned upside down? Thank you, I said quietly, my voice hollow. Carol reached out, touching my arm gently. David, whatever happens, we're here for you. Your family. I nodded, but their words felt distant, like they were coming from a place I could no longer reach. The next morning came too quickly. I hadn't slept, lying awake on the couch in Frank and Carol's living room as the events of the previous night replayed in my mind like a relentless, unending reel. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating any hope of clarity. By the time I sat up, rubbing the stiffness from my neck, I could hear hushed voices in the kitchen. I recognized Michelle's soft tone immediately. She was here. I stood, every muscle tense, and walked toward the sound of her voice. As I entered the kitchen, the conversation stopped abruptly. Michelle turned to look at me, her face pale and drawn, her eyes rimmed with red. Carol sat at the table, her expression heavy with worry, while Frank leaned against the counter, his arms crossed and his jaw set. David, Michelle said, her voice tentative. Michelle? I replied flatly, crossing my arms as I leaned against the doorway. Your parents already know, I added, my voice clipped, so you can save the theatrics. It's all out in the open now. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked to her parents for support. Carol reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Michelle, Frank said sternly, his voice heavy with disappointment. You need to explain yourself. What the hell is going on? Michelle took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she gripped her mug. I don't know where to start, she admitted. Start with the truth, I said sharply, my anger barely contained. She flinched but nodded. The truth is, I've been struggling for a long time. With who I am, with what I want. Who you are. Frank echoed, his brows furrowed. What does that even mean, Michelle? You've been married for years. You have a life, a husband. I know, she said quickly, her voice breaking. I know, and I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt David. But I've always known I was attracted to women. I thought I could bury it, ignore it, but it never went away. Her words hung in the air like a cloud of smoke, choking the room. I couldn't hold back any longer. So what was the plan, Michelle? Just keep lying to me forever? Or was I supposed to stumble on your secret like I did last night? I didn't plan for you to find out like that, she said, her tears flowing freely now. I didn't plan for any of this. I've been so confused, David. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. You talk before you destroy someone's life. I snapped, slamming my hand against the counter. You don't just sneak around behind their back and hope they never find out. Carol wiped her eyes, looking between the two of us. Michelle, if you've been feeling this way, why didn't you say anything? Why did it have to come to this? I was scared, Michelle admitted, her voice small. I didn't want to lose everything. I thought I could, I don't know, keep both parts of my life separate. Frank let out a bitter laugh. Well, how's that working out for you? Michelle lowered her head, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I don't even recognize you, I said coldly, my voice trembling. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have lied to me, betrayed me, and then expected me to just understand. I'm not expecting you to understand, she said quietly, finally meeting my eyes. I know I've hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm trying to be honest now, David. I'm trying to figure out who I am. And what am I supposed to do with that? I demanded, my voice rising again. Just stand by while you figure it out? Pretend like none of this happened. No, she said, shaking her head. I wouldn't ask that of you. I don't know what else to say. Frank stepped forward, his tone firm. Michelle, you need to take responsibility for this. David didn't deserve what you did to him. None of us deserved to be blindsided like this. I know, she whispered. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over us like a heavy blanket. I felt like a stranger in my own life, the foundation of everything I believed crumbling beneath me. I need to go, I said abruptly, turning toward the door. David, please. Michelle called after me, her voice cracking. I stopped, my hand on the doorframe, but I didn't turn around. I can't do this right now, Michelle. I need time, space, something. But I can't be here. With that, I walked out of the house, leaving her sobbing in the kitchen and her parents watching helplessly. I drove aimlessly, the streets blurring into one another as I tried to process everything. Michelle's words replayed in my head on an endless loop. Asterisk. I've been lying to myself. Asterisk, asterisk. I didn't want to hurt you. Asterisk, asterisk. I'm trying to figure out who I am. Asterisk. But what about me? What about my life, my identity, my sense of trust? Did that mean nothing to her? After what felt like hours, I pulled into an empty parking lot overlooking the city. I killed the engine and leaned back in my seat, staring at the distant skyline. This wasn't just about Michelle's infidelity anymore. It was about the lies, the betrayal, and the fact that she had shattered the foundation of everything we'd built together. I wasn't sure how long I sat there before I reached for my phone. My hand trembled as I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name of my lawyer, Adam Kendrick. I hit call. David. Adam's voice was sharp and professional, though tinged with concern. It's been a while. What's going on? I need your help, I said, my voice tight. With what? I paused, gripping the phone tightly. A divorce. And I want to make sure I don't lose what's mine in the process. There was a beat of silence on the other end. I'm sorry to hear that, David. Are you sure about this? Yes, I said firmly. I caught her cheating, Adam. She's been lying to me for months, years maybe. And now, she's telling me she doesn't even know who she is anymore. All right, Adam said, his tone turning businesslike. First things first. I'll need to meet with you to go over the details. Do you have access to your financial records, joint accounts, property deeds? Yes, I replied. I have everything. Good. Keep it that way. Don't let her move assets or make any big withdrawals without your knowledge. And don't confront her about this. Let me handle the legal side of things. She's already destroyed everything, I said bitterly. There's nothing left to confront her about.
Adam siket.
I know this is hard, David, but you need to stay level-headed. If you want to come out of this intact, you need to play this smart. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. When can we meet? How about tomorrow morning? My office, 9 o'clock. I'll be there. After hanging up, I sat in the car for a while longer, staring at the phone in my hand. A divorce. It felt like a death sentence to the life I had imagined for us. But what choice did I have? Staying with Michelle after what she'd done would only destroy me further. I made another call, this time to a private investigator I'd worked with years ago during a dispute at my old company. If Michelle had hidden her secrets so well, I needed to make sure there wasn't more I didn't know. The next morning, I sat across from Adam in his sleek office, a folder of documents spread out on the table between us. This is a mess, Adam said, scanning through the paperwork I'd brought. But the good news is, you've been smart about keeping track of everything. That's going to work in your favor. I don't care about the money, I said bitterly. I just want her to pay for what she's done. Well, a clean divorce is one way, Adam said. But if you want to fight for full control of the house and other joint property, we can use her infidelity against her. Did you document what you saw? I didn't exactly think to grab a camera in the moment, I said dryly.
Adam simirket faintly.
Fair enough. But you have witnesses, her parents, for one. And if you hire a PI, they can help gather evidence. The more you have, the stronger your case will be. I nodded. Do it. Whatever it takes, I want everything. The house, the assets, everything we worked for. Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. All right, David. But just remember, this is going to get ugly. You're ready for that, right? After what I've been through, I said coldly. Ugly doesn't scare me anymore. That evening, I returned to the house. It wasn't my home anymore. It felt hollow, every room a reminder of the betrayal that had unfolded within its walls. Michelle was there, waiting. She was sitting on the living room couch, her knees drawn to her chest, a mug of tea clutched in her hands. She looked up as I entered, her face pale and etched with worry. "David," she began softly, setting the mug on the coffee table. I raised a hand, silencing her. "Don't. I'm not here for excuses or apologies. We're past that." Her shoulders sagged, her eyes filling with tears again. "Then why are you here?" I tossed the folder of documents onto the table in front of her. "Because this is happening, Michelle. I've spoken to my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." Her breath hitched, and she stared at the folder like it might burn her if she touched it. "Divorce?" she whispered, as though the word itself hurt to say. "What did you expect?" I snapped, my voice cold. "Did you think I'd just forgive and forget? That we'd somehow move past this?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I didn't think that. I didn't want it to end like this." "Well, you should have thought of that before you destroyed our marriage," I said bitterly, pacing the room. "Before you lied to me for years. Before you decided I wasn't enough." "It's not about you not being enough," she said, her voice rising. "It was never about that, David. Don't." I cut her off, glaring at her. "Don't try to spin this into something noble or complicated. You cheated, Michelle. You betrayed me. End of story." She stood then, tears streaming down her face. "You don't think I know that? You don't think I hate myself for what I've done? I've been trying to figure out who I am. David. I've been trapped in a life that didn't feel like mine, and I didn't know how to tell you that." "Trapped?" I scoffed, the word cutting deep. "You were trapped in a loving marriage, in a home we built together? You were trapped by a husband who would have done anything for you." "It wasn't about you," she cried, her voice cracking. "It was about me. I tried, David. I tried to bury this part of myself, but it wouldn't go away. And I didn't know how to tell you without breaking your heart." I laughed bitterly. "Well, congratulations, Michelle. You broke it anyway." She sank back onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her crumble. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy, to comfort her like I had so many times before. But the weight of her betrayal crushed that impulse. "This isn't just about us anymore," I said after a long silence. "It's about everything we've built. The house, the finances, everything. My lawyer is drawing up the papers. And I'm not walking away from this empty-handed." Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with panic.
David, no.
"Please don't do this. You don't get to ask me for anything," I said coldly. "Not anymore. David, we can figure this out," she pleaded. "We can go to counseling or take some time apart. Please, don't throw everything away." "You already threw it away," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "All I'm doing is picking up the pieces." She sobbed harder, her body shaking with the force of it. But I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of her cries following me like a ghost. Days turned into weeks as the wheels of the divorce process began to turn. My lawyer, Adam, had been relentless, ensuring every piece of evidence was documented and every detail of our finances was scrutinized. I had moved into a small apartment across town, leaving the house, the one we'd built together, for Michelle. For now. I kept telling myself it was just a matter of time before I got the answers I needed, but the waiting gnawed at me. That's when the private investigator I'd hired, Dan Harris, called. "David, we've got something," he said, his voice sharp and businesslike. "Tell me," I said, gripping the phone tightly. We tracked her activity over the past few months, phone records, locations, emails. "You're not going to like this. I've stopped expecting good news," I muttered. "Just tell me." Dan hesitated, and that brief pause felt like an eternity. "She's been seeing the two women for over a year," he said finally. "It wasn't just some spur-of-the-moment thing. There's a pattern: texts, emails, meeting spots. It's a full-blown relationship." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd suspected it was more than a fling, but hearing the confirmation made it feel all the more real. "There's more," Dan continued cautiously. I felt my stomach churn. "More. She's also been seeing another man, a guy named Evan. They've been meeting at a hotel in town for months. Same pattern. Texts, calls, dates. It's all in the file. A fresh wave of anger coursed through me, hot and unrelenting. You're telling me she's been juggling 3 people behind my back? 3.
Den siged.
I know it's a lot to take in, David, but I've documented everything. The hotel meetings, the phone logs, the messages. It's all there. Send it to me, I said through gritted teeth. I'll send it right now, Dan said. And David, I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. You deserve better than this. When I hung up, I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Michelle wasn't just unfaithful. She was living an entirely separate life. 3 separate lives. The betrayal was deeper than I could have imagined. The file Dan sent me arrived within minutes. I opened it with trembling hands, scrolling through page after page of evidence. There it was, in black and white, texts with the 2 women, discussing future plans and intimate encounters. Reservations at a boutique hotel under Evan's name, with timestamps that lined up perfectly with Michelle's unexplained absences. Flirty exchanges between her and Evan, filled with inside jokes and pet names that made my stomach turn. I forwarded the entire file to Adam with a single message. Asterisk, she's worse than we thought. Use this. Asterisk. The next day, I sat across from Adam in his sleek office, the file from the PI spread out in front of him. This is gold, Adam said, gesturing to the papers. Not only does it strengthen your case, but it also gives us leverage in negotiations. If she thinks this is going to end amicably, she's in for a rude awakening. She's not just unfaithful, I said bitterly, pacing the room. She's living a triple life. 3 people, Adam. How do you even do that?
Adam nodded grimly.
It's not uncommon in cases like this. People who get away with one affair often think they can get away with more. But it works in your favor. Judges don't take kindly to this level of deception. I stopped pacing and looked at him. I want the house. I want the assets. I want her to know exactly what it feels like to lose everything. And you will, Adam said firmly. But remember, we have to play this smart. Let the evidence speak for itself. No emotional outbursts in court. I'll do whatever it takes, I said. She doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at the file on my laptop. The texts, the photos, the receipts. They were like a blueprint of her betrayal, each one another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I can't wait until it's just us. One message read. Soon, Michelle had replied to one of the women. Asterisk. He'll never know what hit him. Asterisk. And then there was a text to Evan. Asterisk. I wish I could stay the night. You make me feel so alive. Asterisk. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. She had been building a life without me for years, piece by piece, lie by lie. But now I had the truth, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, and the air in the courtroom was thick with tension. I sat beside Adam, my lawyer, my jaw clenched as I avoided looking at Michelle, who sat across the room with her attorney. She wore a conservative blouse, her hair neatly tied back, as though dressing the part of a composed and reasonable woman could somehow erase the months of betrayal. Adam leaned over, speaking in a low tone. Remember, David, keep your emotions in check. Let me do the heavy lifting. I nodded but didn't reply. My focus was locked on the judge, a stern-looking woman whose piercing gaze swept over the room as the proceedings began. Michelle's attorney spoke first, painting her as a misunderstood woman trying to reconcile her identity while navigating a failing marriage. It was infuriating, but I bit my tongue, just like Adam had advised. When it was Adam's turn, he approached the bench with the file from the private investigator. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm and measured. The evidence we're presenting today will demonstrate that my client's wife wasn't simply finding herself. She was conducting multiple affairs, simultaneously, with 2 women and another man. Gasps rippled through the small audience, and Michelle's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Adam continued, laying out the timeline of her betrayals. He handed the judge printed texts, hotel receipts, and photos. This isn't just a lapse in judgment, Your Honor. This is a calculated, ongoing pattern of deception. Michelle's face was pale, her hands trembling as she whispered furiously to her attorney. The judge studied the evidence with a furrowed brow. Mrs. Porter, she addressed Michelle, do you deny the validity of these documents? Michelle hesitated, glancing at her attorney, who stood and said, Your Honor, we acknowledge the evidence but request the court consider the emotional strain my client was under. Strain? I couldn't hold back anymore, standing abruptly. She wasn't under strain. She was having the time of her life at my expense. Mr. Porter, the judge barked, silencing me with a sharp glare. Sit down or be removed. I dropped back into my seat, my heart pounding. The judge turned back to Michelle. Your actions have consequences, Mrs. Porter. This court finds your behavior to be egregious. As such, I'm awarding Mr. Porter the house and the majority of your shared assets. Michelle's gasp was audible. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of her decisions came crashing down. As we stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of the judge's ruling hung heavy in the air. Michelle was standing with her attorney a few feet away, her face streaked with tears. She looked at me, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something, but I didn't stop. Adam clapped me on the shoulder. You did well in there, he said. The evidence spoke for itself. She didn't have a leg to stand on. It doesn't feel like a victory, I muttered.
Adam siket.
That's because you're not there yet. Healing takes time, but you took the first step. I nodded, though the ache in my chest made it hard to feel anything close to relief. As I reached the exit, I heard her voice behind me. David, wait. I froze, my body stiffening, but I turned to face her. She stood alone now, her attorney nowhere in sight. Her face was a mix of regret and desperation. What do you want, Michelle? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking, for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just needed to say it. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved, now a stranger to me. Sorry doesn't undo what you did, I said quietly. You made your choices, Michelle, and now you have to live with them. She flinched as if I had struck her, but I didn't let the sight of her pain soften me. You weren't just unfaithful, I continued. You tore apart everything we built together. You lied to me, to your family, to yourself. I hope it was worth it. David, she whispered, tears welling up again. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said, cutting her off. And now it's over. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. That night, as I sat in my nearly empty apartment, I thought about everything I had lost. My home, my marriage, the life I thought I knew. It was all gone. But I also thought about what I had gained. Clarity, closure, and the chance to start over. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel, hope. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No more heated arguments, no cryptic texts, no lingering doubts hanging in the air. The house was mine now, but I hadn't stepped foot inside since the ruling. I wasn't ready to face the memories etched into its walls. Instead, I focused on building something new, starting with myself. I picked up old hobbies I'd neglected, like hiking and photography, finding solace in the steady rhythm of nature and the click of my camera. Each step I took on a wooded trail felt like a small victory, a reclamation of the life I'd let slip through my fingers. I also began reconnecting with people I'd drifted away from. Friends I hadn't seen in years reached out after hearing about the divorce, offering their support. My family was a constant presence, my mom calling daily just to check in. You sound better today, she said during one of our conversations. I feel better, I admitted. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. But it wasn't just the distractions or the support that pulled me out of the darkness. It was the hard truths I forced myself to confront. I had spent years pouring everything I had into my marriage, ignoring the cracks that had started to form. I realized now that I had lost pieces of myself in the process, pieces I was finally starting to reclaim. One evening, As I sat on the balcony of my apartment watching the sun dip below the horizon, I allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. Michelle's betrayal had shattered me. It had stripped away the life I thought I knew and left me raw and exposed. But it had also taught me something important, about resilience, about boundaries, and about self-worth. For so long, I had defined myself by my role as a husband. But now, I was learning to define myself as a person. And while the scars of what happened would never fully fade, I knew they wouldn't define me either. I raised a glass of whiskey to the fading light and spoke aloud, as if to the universe itself. To rebuilding, I said quietly, and to never losing myself again. As the stars began to dot the night sky, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I was excited to see where it might lead.